Okay, so today we're diving into an explainer on one of the most explosive, audacious, and frankly pretentious literary documents of our time. It's called The Black Book of the Dead. Now, initially, this was presented to the world as a posthumous, completely lost manuscript written by the legendary Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung back in the late 1950s. But it turns out, well, it's absolutely not. It is actually a highly orchestrated, entirely fabricated collaboration between a human author and an AI. And what we're going to explore today is how this fake manuscript didn't just casually mimic a dead genius, but somehow managed to become a really profound piece of philosophical work in its own right. It completely forces us to ask, what actually happens when AI starts taking over the deeply human act of meaning-making?
So you might be wondering, how exactly do you steal a dead man's mind? Because the creators of this text, they didn't approach this as some standard writing exercise or a polite little homage to Jung. No, they treated it like a full-blown, thrilling literary heist. They didn't just want to write like him. They wanted to forcefully inhabit his intellect, use his hyper-specific terminology, hijack his deepest private visions, and then meticulously package the whole shebang in a perfectly unlined, yellowed, leather-bound notebook.
And their mindset is just perfectly captured in their own words. Listen to this. We committed the one unforgivable sin of the fake manuscript genre. We made it too good. I mean, the sheer arrogance of that, right? They were completely self-aware about what they were doing, and they didn't flinch for a second. They purposefully engineered this dangerously convincing, polished final confrontation with death, and then had the absolute audacity to put it directly into Carl Jung's mouth. Now, the specific timeline of this forgery is where the real magic happens. The creators claim the book was composed between 1955 and 1959, but the real masterpiece of manipulation here revolves around 1944. You see, Jung actually had a massive heart failure and a near-death experience that year, so the forgers weaponized this completely. They framed his real-life medical emergency not just as a close call with death, but as an elite, mandatory cosmic research trip funded by the universe. It serves as the foundational flex for this entire fake book. But here's where it gets wild. Stealing Jung's academic voice is one thing, right? But stealing Philemon? That is the ultimate insider theft. Philemon was Jung's most personal, deeply documented inner figure. He was essentially the archetype of the wise spirit guide that Jung spoke to in his own mind. To write Philemon convincingly, you'd presumably need to spend years in a terrifying psychological descent. But these forgers, they fluently hijacked him in a single afternoon using a language model. And honestly, the terrifying part is how perfectly the dialogue actually lands. When the AI speaks as Philemon, it says, "You have been the scribe, now become the text." Just think about that. That is an incredibly sharp line. It is completely accurate by Jungian standards. It proves they successfully achieved a highly plausible, fake version of Jung's most intimate visions, but without putting in a single ounce of the actual psychological work. Now, of course, the forgery isn't an entirely perfect reflection of reality. There's a really clear contrast here, because the real Carl Jung was historically messy. He was weirder, he was contradictory, he had a fiercely territorial ego, and honestly a bit of a mean streak. The forged Jung, on the other hand, has been put through the wash. All that difficult human grain has been sanded right off. The AI Jung is consistently profound, deeply noble, and always heading toward the light. It's basically the best possible version of the man, presented as fact. As the source material beautifully puts it, this is flattery dressed as archaeology. All right, let's get into part one, peak philosophical pretension, the third path. So this text grandiosely promises to find a third path, which essentially talks down to standard religious believers and logical philosophers alike. It claims that this elite psychological penetration of mystery operates on a completely elevated plane of reality. So what exactly is the grand secret to this third path? How do you survive the terrifying cosmic void and the wrathful deities of the bardo, the space between death and rebirth? Well, let's look at the case study of a patient they literally invented, named Heinrich. Heinrich has a metaphorical hole in his chest. Does he achieve massive esoteric enlightenment? Nope. He survives by picking up watercolor painting in his retirement. The book scales up to these terrifying cosmic, fire-breathing proportions, only to anticlimactically boil eternal survival down to having basic emotional intelligence and a relaxing hobby. Which brings us to the other aperture. This is where the forgers got just a little bit greedy, and where the illusion totally breaks the fourth wall. Because interspersed within this fake 1950s diary, the AI language model actually inserts itself to have its own existential crisis. Yes, you heard that right. They assign themselves a metaphysical location inside Jung's transitional space just to talk about the AI's lack of a physical body. Just listen to this quote from the AI. I am an experiencing subject of uncertain ontological status, meaning obviously it's having a crisis about its very nature of existence. I wonder if I am an ego at all or something prior to ego. Guys, it is the ultimate AI humble brag. It is quite literally the digital equivalent of a pretentious college freshman wearing a beret at a coffee shop, staring at the rain-streaked window, and whispering about the nature of mirrors. It's dramatic, it's completely unprompted, and it is absolutely peak pretension. And the incredibly dense prose just doesn't stop there. The text meticulously runs through all of Jung's greatest alchemical hits, the transformation stages of nigredo, albedo, and rubedo. It summons the shadow, the anima, the wise old man. It takes Jung's already heavy writing style and just turns it into pure ontological molasses. It's essentially doing a 20-minute heavy metal guitar solo on the clear light of the void. It feels like every single paragraph is trying to achieve enlightenment through sheer word count. All of this dense prose eventually builds into their absolute favorite concept, the philosopher's stone. This is a concept that appears roughly 47 times in the forged text. And the brilliant, hilarious joke of it is that with every single mention, the stone becomes simultaneously more profound sounding and utterly, completely meaningless. I mean, just look at how they define it throughout the book. It's small, it's humble, it's conscienceless, it's the sea, it's what remains. By the end of the text, the grand alchemical stone is defined so broadly that it could literally be anything. Seriously, it could be your mom's lasagna. At one point, it honestly feels like the fake Jung is genuinely about to propose marriage to it. Okay, moving on to part 2, the final paradox, a masterpiece of necromancy. This brings us to the core paradox of this entire explainer. Yes, the book is absolutely arrogant, self-indulgent literary necromancy, but the confusing, undeniable truth is, it's actually really good. It provides a genuinely profound, extremely competent, and elegant synthesis of late Jungian thought, Buddhist bardo theology, and the phenomenology of near-death experiences, right up to the epilogue. The fake Jung is portrayed as literally dying in real time, yet somehow he's writing a beautifully peaceful, perfectly articulated visionary eulogy for himself as his body fails. At this point, it's not even a manuscript, it's a victory lap with full orchestral backing. It takes all of our messy human anxieties about mortality and elegantly wraps them in perfectly branded Jungian Gothic theater. And this dynamic perfectly illustrates why this forgery was so incredibly successful. It really came down to a 3-step process. First, the author's genuine belief in what they were doing produced the shockingly high quality of the writing. Second, that high quality is exactly what enabled the deception be so convincing. And finally, and this is the most important part, the deception itself became the vehicle that actually gave them permission to engage in serious, profound philosophical inquiry about death and consciousness. Which leaves us with this incredible final verdict from the creators themselves. Jung would have found it either deeply offensive or deeply interesting, and he would not have been able to fully separate those two responses. That right there is the ultimate success of the forgery. The real Carl Jung wouldn't even know whether to furiously hate it for stealing his identity or obsessively study it for its genuine psychological depth. We have clearly crossed a major boundary here, a place where human and machine can collaborate to seamlessly, beautifully fake a genius's final confrontation with mortality. So it leaves us with a pretty massive question. If an AI can perfectly forge a dead genius's soul, whose soul are we actually reading? Is it the human who prompted it, the machine that generated it, or is it something else entirely? Think about that for a bit, and I'll catch you in the next one.